Eleven's final decision didn't protect her friends. It betrayed her own psychology. We were told for 5 seasons that friends don't lie, but the series finale suggests that the narrative was lying to the audience about its own stakes. By the end of the story, the script chose a safe, cinematic resolution over the cold, internal logic established when we first met a terrified girl in a hospital gown. Spoilers ahead. To understand why this ending fails a character, we have to decode Eleven's core engine of fear. And that fear was never the Mind Flayer, never the Demogorgons, never even Vecna himself. Her deepest terror was something far more human, the complete erasure of her personhood. Since her time in the lab, her entire existence has been defined by being a tool for others. First, she was a weapon for Papa, a biological experiment trained to kill on command. Then she became the ultimate deterrent for survival Hawkins, the town's unspoken insurance policy against supernatural collapse. Every relationship in her life, no matter how well-intentioned, has been transactional. Mike needs her to save the world. Hopper needs her to stay hidden. Joyce needs her to close gates. The government needs her to win Cold War battles in other dimensions. What makes this pattern disturbing is that Eleven internalizes it as love. She confuses being needed with being valued. Throughout the series, we see her measure her worth entirely through her utility to others. When she loses her powers in Season 3, she doesn't just lose her abilities, she loses her identity. The show frames this as a journey toward normalcy, but watch what actually happens. She spends the entire season trying to become useful again, not through friendship or connection, but through regaining the one thing that made people need her. This is a psychological trap the series built, but never resolved. Eleven's power was always a manifestation of her pain, not a gift she developed. Every time she reaches deep into her psychic reservoir, she's pulling from a well of trauma. The nosebleeds aren't just a visual cue. They're the physical cost of weaponizing her suffering. The internal rules of the story establish that her abilities have a biological limit, a breaking point where the human body can't sustain the psychic load. But here's where the finale's logic collapses. In the final arc, we see her forced back into that exact role, the ultimate weapon, the last line of defense, the human shield for a town that never fully accepted her as anything more than a useful anomaly. The show frames her ultimate victory as a triumph of will, a heroic moment of self-sacrifice, but logically, it is a psychological regression to the exact state she spent 5 seasons trying to escape. The narrative tries to differentiate this final stand from her lab days by surrounding it with a language of choice. She chose to fight. She wanted to save them. But examine the actual mechanics of that choice. What were her alternatives? Let her friends die? Let the world end? This isn't autonomy. This is the illusion of choice within a system designed to ensure only one outcome. It's the same manipulation Dr. Brenner used, just wrapped in the language of friendship instead of patriotism. And this brings us to the spectacle trap, the moment where the show prioritized scale over substance. The Upside Down was always a visual metaphor for Eleven's fractured psyche, a dimension literally created through her traumatic psychic break. The narrative's obsession with making each season's threat bigger, louder, more apocalyptic forced the writers into a corner. How do you resolve a metaphor for internal trauma with an external battle? You don't, not logically. The final confrontation treats Eleven like a superhero, not a traumatized child. We get wide shots of psychic energy, sweeping music, friends shouting encouragement from the sidelines. It's cinematic, it's emotional, and it completely misses the point of who this character actually is. The girl who begged Mike to promise she could have a normal life, who spent an entire season learning how to be a regular teenager, who desperately wanted to go to the snowball and just be a kid. That girl would never choose to remain the world's supernatural defense system. But the story needed a big finish, so it broke its own character. Let's examine the physical cost the series conveniently forgot. In earlier seasons, using her powers left Eleven exhausted, bleeding, sometimes unconscious for days. The show established clear biological limits. When she closed the first gate in Season 2, it nearly killed her. When she fought the Mind Flayer in Season 3, she lost her abilities entirely, her body's way of protecting itself from complete psychic annihilation. By treating her final stand as a cost-free miracle, the narrative doesn't just break its rules of physics and biology. It suggests that Eleven's trauma is now being successfully managed rather than healed. If her powers are fueled by pain and she emerges from finale as the most powerful being on Earth, then the logical conclusion is disturbing. Her trauma has been optimized, not resolved. She's learned to weaponize her suffering more efficiently. The show asks us to celebrate this as growth. Now, consider what happens after the cameras stop rolling. 11 returns to a world that knows she's capable of psychic warfare. The government that spent decades trying to create her will spend the next decades trying to replicate or control her. She can't go to college. She can't have a normal relationship. She can't ever stop being the thing she was engineered to be, because the finale validated that role instead of dismantling it. Her friend will age, move on, build lives. She will remain frozen in the role of protector, waiting for the next crisis, the next gate, the next threat that only she can stop. This isn't a happy ending. It's a life sentence. And the most disturbing part is that everyone around her, everyone who claims to love her, will continue to rely on her power while ignoring the cost of maintaining it. This is where a logically consistent ending diverges completely from the spectacle we received. To truly close the door on the upside down, the anchor must be removed. 11 is that anchor. She is the bridge. Her psychic signature is what keeps the dimensions permeable. As long as she exists in the physical world with her abilities intact, the connection remains open, not because of malice, but because of the fundamental nature of what she is. A consistent alternate path would follow the rules of inevitable consequence, and it would look like this. First, 11 realizes through her final confrontation with Vecna that she isn't fighting an external enemy. She's fighting the living consequence of what the lab created. Vecna is what happens when psychic power consumes identity completely. He is her future if she continues down this path. This realization doesn't come from a speech or a revelation, but from a simple recognition that every time she uses her abilities, she becomes a little less human and a little more weapon. Second, she understands that the upside down isn't a separate dimension that can be sealed with enough force. It's a wound in reality caused by her own fractured psyche, and wounds don't close when you keep tearing them open. The only way to truly end the cycle is to remove herself from the equation, not through death, but through a calculated choice to step through the gate and seal it from inside permanently. Third, this decision would be hers alone, made in a quiet moment without an audience, without a dramatic goodbye scene. Because true autonomy, the thing she's been searching for since the beginning, means making a choice that no one else would ask her make and no one else can talk her out of. It's the first decision in her entire life that isn't about being useful to someone else. Fourth, the mechanism of this choice matters. She doesn't sacrifice herself to save the town. She chooses herself over the town. She chooses to exist in a space where she is neither weapon nor victim, neither superhero nor lab experiment. The upside down, stripped of its monsters and malice, becomes simply a dimension where her psychic signature is a baseline reality. She isn't fighting it anymore. She is it. And in that fusion, she finally finds a peace that the physical world could never offer her. Fifth, this creates a narrative vacuum that the series desperately needed. Without 11 as their safety net, Mike, Will, Dustin, Lucas, Max, they have to actually grow up. They have to face threats without a superhuman solution. They have to learn that sometimes people leave, not because they stop caring, but because staying would destroy them. It's a harder lesson than defeating monsters, but it's the one the series needed to teach. Sixth, and most importantly, this ending would honor the pattern 11 has shown throughout the entire series. Isolation as self-preservation. Every time she's pushed to her limit, she withdraws. Season 1, she disappears into the void. Season 2, she hides with Hopper. Season 3, she loses her powers. The finale should have been the final evolution of that pattern. Choosing permanent isolation not as defeat, but as the ultimate act of self-determination. This isn't a tragic death. It's a calculated sacrifice that fulfills her promise of protection, while finally removing her from being a tool for the government, a savior for her peers, or a symbol for the audience. She would find peace in a realm where she isn't a freak or a weapon, but simply the master of her own space, finally free from the expectations of the world above. The finale we received gave a spectacle, but it cost us the character's growth. When you value the explosion more than the person holding the fuse, when you prioritize the visual impact over the psychological truth, the logic of the story collapses. 11 deserved an ending that matched her psychology, not one that matched the genre expectations of supernatural television. The series built a character defined by her search for autonomy, then ended with her locked into the exact role she spent 5 seasons trying to escape. If you change the choice, you change the person. And sometimes the most consistent ending isn't the one that makes everyone smile. It's the one that makes everyone understand.